I had received death threats from the militia leader. There's a Quebec militia leader. Serge Provost was immediately arrested after I reported his death threats to the police. I reported their audit failure internally at the Caisse. They threw me out, and a couple of senior vice presidents told me how easy it was to kick out the English. Comment c'était facile à mettre dehors les Anglais. And obviously they weren't listening. Many of the people in the room witnessed these ministers and their friends who were just sending text messages. Some were laughing at me and so forth. So this is the main problem we have as minority and English-speaking minority in Quebec, is that they really don't care about our human rights. They degraded us to subhuman to them. And to them, eux, ils sont les maîtres. They're the masters of Quebec. And we're just slaves. He was trying to create a little militia, and he said he had 700 people. In reality, we've seen only 15, 20 people with illegal firearms on YouTube videos. You can see them, Milices Patriotiques Québécoises, for yourself. And then thankfully his store was shut down, so he's not distributing these arms. Even though I'm trying to save us, I was trying to save us in 2008, billions of dollars flying out the window at the Caisse before their worst ever performance was revealed to the public in 2009. The judge wrote down the fact that I received racial comments giving me civil evidence. However, that civil evidence, when I handed that decision over to the Human Rights Commission, they said it wasn't enough evidence. At least the police, though, were very cooperative, and they went after the man to make sure that he's not distributing arms to his separatist militia friends who want a pure, white, French-speaking only Quebec. C'est typiquement les séparatistes qui pensent que nos droits humains n'existent pas au Québec. And we refuse to accept this. We're not leaving, and we're not going to stop until your bill is dead in the water. And Diane, vous êtes irresponsable. Tellement, tellement irresponsable. Vous jouez comme une salariate en ce moment. Hi, my name is Hugo Shebbeare. I was born in Vancouver. I'm Canadian, and I was raised bilingual from the age of 5-6 years old at l'École bilingue in Vancouver. I had spent many years on contract working here in Quebec, and then I took a contract after working for Dell. I took a contract with the Quebec government's pension fund, which is known as CDP Capital, outside of Quebec, and inside of Quebec it's known as the Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec. So lacaisse.com is where you would find the CDP Capital site. I went to work for the Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec, CDP Capital, with the intention to have a permanent job, because it was a 6-month contract which would turn into a permanent job. But it was obvious within 3 or 4 months into that contract I was not made to feel welcome within the organization, and I was psychologically harassed several times. And therefore, after the whole event happened, after 8 months of being there, and I reported their audit failure internally at the Caisse, they threw me out, and a couple of senior vice presidents told me how easy it was to kick out the English. Comment c'était facile à mettre dehors les Anglais. Even though I'm trying to save us, I was trying to save us in 2008, billions of dollars flying out the window at the Caisse before their worst ever performance was revealed to the public in 2009. Unfortunately, after all the evidence was given, I was basically blamed for writing a document covering the audit failure for the Caisse, and the document was banned from public publication. Although I had done several contracts before, I had never tried to become permanent, and this case at the Caisse de dépôt and the CDP Capital was clearly evident that they don't want Anglophones or any non-Francophones to stay within the Quebec civil service. I had received death threats from the militia leader. There's a Quebec militia leader. Serge Provost was immediately arrested after I reported his death threats to the police. Unfortunately, after all of the arrests and death threats, we went to the Crown Prosecutor here in Montreal, le Procureur Général, ici à Montréal, and ils ont rien fait. They didn't do anything. They didn't just honor the criminal code, which is a death threat is a death threat, and the criminal code says clearly what you do with that is that you put somebody away for 5 years or at least 2 years or something. But the man got off scot-free. At least the police, though, were very cooperative, and they went after the man to make sure that he's not distributing arms to his separatist militia friends who want a pure, white, French-speaking only Quebec. But the intimidation continued in other ways. The cyberbullying, you could call it, continued from people like Louis Préfontaine, this infamous Anglophobic separatist who just wants to continue a war and divide people up by language, and he would post a photo of our house and our address and say, ask him how his daughter Ines is doing. And obviously I didn't like that very much. I made several reports to police, but the police they said, well, ce sont juste des méchanteries, they're just mean things he's saying, but there's nothing much we can do about it. And they continued in other methods too. There's a man from Belleuil, his name is Renaud Léger. He continued to threaten and post my address and tell me to go back to BC and repeat this typical separatist phrases, la loi 100 ou la 400. Well, Bill 101 or take the 401 down to Toronto. Well, my family's been here for centuries. I'm not leaving. I love Quebec, and I want to make Quebec a better place for everybody from any background. And it's not just a place for pure land white francophones. C'est la place pour tout le monde ici au Québec. Si on est vraiment ouvert, il faut cesser l'intimidation par les séparatistes contre ceux qui veulent faire valoir les droits de la personne en particulier. Les droits de vivre sans discrimination basée sur langue. We do not want to live here in Quebec with discrimination based on language. When I was a spokesperson for the Quebec Office of the English Language, which I stopped at the end of May this year, 2013, I went in April, after submitting in January, I think, to participate in the hearings. So we tried to explain in front of these ministers, particularly Diane de Courcy. On est allé à Québec, on est descendu à Québec pour expliquer à Madame la ministre Diane de Courcy que ça vaut pas la peine la loi 14, ça crée la chicane, ça crée une guerre non voulue. So I went there with about 30 people in a bus, and we filled the room. There were 14 of them and 30 of us, and we wanted to make sure that they get past the idea of continuing this route of a sore loser. And obviously they weren't listening. Many of the people in the room witnessed these ministers and their friends who were just sending text messages. Some were laughing at me and so forth. So this is the main problem we have as minority and English-speaking minority in Quebec, is that they really don't care about our human rights. They've degraded us to subhuman to them. And to them, eux, ils sont les maîtres. They're the masters of Quebec. And we're just slaves. Prime Minister Harper and Governor General Johnson, I really want you to listen to this, because it's very important that you do all you can to stop these laws, whether it's disallowance or whatever you can do to help us, all minorities here in Quebec, and the freedom that we need to create wealth here and to live without discrimination, is that you stop these laws, because we've done all we can to explain to Ministre de Courcy les règles de droit existent pour elle aussi, mais eux ils croient que les règles de droit n'existent pas pour eux. They can do what they want. The rule of law doesn't exist to them. Although she is continuing this voie de mauvais perdant, this sore loser. And what are the sore loser separatists doing here in Quebec? Is they're creating law after law after law, discriminatory laws, of course. And this is the latest one. So when you have multiple gestures like this, since 2004 in Quebec, it is illegal to psychologically harass people at work. Well, Madame la Ministre, vous êtes au travail. Vous êtes sujet à la loi de la Commission des normes de travail. We're all, when we're working, We're subject to these laws, so you should be too. You're psychologically harassing our community. C'est l'harcèlement psychologique parce que vous continuez de mettre des lois en place qui sont non voulues, des gestes posés. Vous faites des gestes que nous ne voulons rien savoir des lois. Toutes ces lois on perd depuis une génération la richesse au Québec. We've already lost for a generation so much wealth here in Quebec because of law after law of discriminatory laws, like Bill 101, 8672, you name it, 114, 115, sorry, 104, and they're not working. Il faut un nouveau modèle québécois, and I hope that Governor General Johnson, David Johnston, and the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, that you do all you can to stop these laws in this province so that all Quebecers can benefit from freedom, linguistic freedom, and the respect for human rights. And particularly Quebec's own laws, not just the human rights laws, but the psychological harassment laws, which Diane de Courcy thinks they don't exist for her, just like she thinks our rights do not exist here in Quebec. I want to thank very much this brave man standing on the other side of the camera here, Mohamed H. He is so brave to have even taken on MSN recently, Cedric Lizotte, who tried to defame him publicly. But he's not insane. He is definitely a limited edition. He's very brave, and I thank you very much for doing all this work, sir. Thank you, brother.